The Florida Gators don't yet have a corner committed for the 2024 cycle, and that has to change soon. We're going to talk about it here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast. Happy Thursday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. And now today we're talking corner recruiting because, well, Florida does not have a corner committed yet. They have everything else but a corner. And so we need to talk about that with Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider, who's going to be joining me in just a second. But I did want to say thank you all. Please do make sure to like, subscribe, comment, review, join the Locked On Gators Discord. The link is in the description below. And now here is Brian Smith. Joining me now for Locked On Gators is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. And Brian, miss you again. I hope you know last week when you were only here once, I did get a comment that said that they were suffering from Brian Smith withdrawal. So just
I'm a little concerned about that.
Just know that they miss you. We will try. We'll get you back multiple times again. But Florida's kind of filled out most of their recruiting class. We know that. They even added one of their biggest question marks, was a blue chip offensive tackle. They added Fletcher Westphal. But now it's just corner, which is a very weird thing to talk about with Florida not having a corner committed yet. But there's a few guys who are coming down the pipeline, Wardell Mack being one of them, where he didn't set a commitment date, but he did recently put out a Final Four: Florida, LSU, Texas, and Florida State. At this point in time, how do you think Florida Gators fans should feel as we get closer to a decision, whenever that may be?
Like they need to make up ground. From what I've heard, Florida's in it, but Florida is probably third right now. Florida State is third, depending on who you ask. Texas may have taken the lead, again, depending on who you ask, which is interesting for a kid from New Orleans. Not that it's not a state right next to it, but those kids, Austin and New Orleans, are really far apart in terms of culture. But had a good visit to the University of Texas. LSU, I don't think has put the screws down on him yet. And it's always interesting when LSU goes after an in-state kid. That's a really hard team to beat. Billy knows the state, obviously, because he coached in that state. But that's a hard state to pull kids out of when LSU wants a player. They've legitimately got a chance to sign the 10 best players in that state this year, which is insane. But it's LSU, too. Florida needs to get him on campus, which they will soon. And I think we'll know more then. If he's going to leave home, what does he want? Because nothing wrong with going to Austin, but Austin and Gainesville, again, very, very different. Two different programs. They're going to be soon to be in the same conference, but that's a very, very different situation. So I need to see Florida make some ground up when he comes into town. Mack, he's worth the effort there. That's a good corner.
Yeah, we'll get this out of the way because we know it's going to be a discussion. We always do this with the kids. He's got a commitment, or he's likely going to commit somewhat soonish. Let's say he commits to not Florida. He's got his current visit scheduled July 29th. Like, do you feel comfortable going, all right, this is going to come down to National Signing Day, or do you think this is just going to go out of July and maybe be an in-season commitment?
For a New Orleans kid, I would guess most often this is going to keep on rolling. That area is so easy to get to, and he's got big box schools after him. He's from a good program. I can't see, like, let's say he commits to Texas. Do you think LSU is going to stop recruiting him? Do you think Billy, who's got ties to that state, is going to stop recruiting him? Florida State has their coaching staff has ties to Louisiana too. That recruitment is going to go through signing day. That is my strong, strong feeling.
Yeah, this is just I'm curious with Wardell Mack. I know that he's generally thought of as an elite corner. Are you comfortable thinking that he would eventually become a legitimate corner one in the SEC?
He could. I need to see more of him. I've only seen him like once, and that was briefly. But at the same time, the offer list backs that up. The Florida offer, based on who their cornerback coach is, gave me a lot of good feel for one. I mean, just legitimately. He knows what he's doing. And he recruited, because he was at LSU, really well in that area. So that alone puts me in that box. And then he has the length and the size. So now the only question is, how much does he want it? The difference between the guys that end up corner one and just being on the roster is all above the shoulder. Because, like this, take LSU and Ford. I mean, they've both got claims to being DBU and stuff like that. The kids that made it were just the ones that wanted it. Like Honey Badger was a 2-star recruit that went to LSU. That guy was unbelievable, but he wanted it. There's different things like that. Physically, though, yeah, Max got the skills.
Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. It's time to take your first swing at betting on the MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. You could bet $20 on, I don't know, Pete Alonso Friday, game's back tomorrow. $20 on Pete Alonso to hit a home run. You could bet for him to hit the first home run of the game too and get even better odds. And guess what? Either your bet cashes, or if you bet $20, you would get $200 back in bonus bets, all with an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use, and I love it. Sign up today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. And remember, FanDuel is an official sponsor of Major League Baseball. Well, yeah, I mean, I know I'm hoping that he's going to be a Florida Gator at this point, especially no corners committed at this point, but that could change this coming week because Teddy Foster, who I feel like we've talked about Teddy Foster more than we've talked about like 5-star corners, but
it's an enigma, man.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting recruit at this point. He announced earlier this week his commitment date is set for this Friday, July 14th. How do you think Florida Gators fans should feel heading into his commitment, potentially being their first corner in the class?
They should be very excited because he's got a lot of upside. They need corners. He's an in-state kid. And if they don't get him, I'm going to blame you. It just, the Florida fan in New York, there's something wrong there. I don't know. But anyway, every sign points to him committing to Billy. I don't know why he wouldn't at this point. I cover Miami and I haven't heard a word about it. So barring something unforeseen, which in recruiting now, let me suffice this. I have been hammered with just random commitments in the last 2 weeks. Kids picking schools and nobody saw. Westfall was not. Did anybody pick him to Florida? No. But it did happen. So I'm leaving the asterisk on every kid now. It's not fair, but I'm doing it anyway. That's just the way it is.
Hey, just the asterisk is, hey, it's 2023. That's how we're doing it now.
It's true.
So Teddy Foster has, I think, a very unique, let's say, recruitment path, I guess. He was kind of completely overlooked, and then Florida was the first SEC school, in-state school, that offered him a scholarship. We know that Miami at least pushed a bit at a certain point. We know that Tennessee wants him, North Carolina wants him, but and that's why he's been a quick riser, not in the sense of climbing rankings, but his offer list, I mean, grew exponentially just in terms of quality there. Yeah. Does that make you think that maybe this is going to be another one of those recruitments that runs down to National Signing Day after the commitment? Or do you think it's kind of a commit and done situation? Because like this is not one of those situations where, oh, we've been recruiting this kid since he was a sophomore. Like we've spent 18 months pursuing this kid. We can't just stop once he commits. Or is it also like we didn't pursue him, but we pushed hard as hell for the past 3 months, so we want to lock him in?
I think it's a little of both. And it also depends on the following question, which only he can answer. Did he grow up, because he's in the state of Florida, did he grow up a Florida fan? Sometimes kids just want to go to a school and that's it. So once they showed interest and all that, I mean, you take a couple visits or whatever, but I want to go to Florida. If he's that kid, he could shut it down. Otherwise, and I've said this 100 times on this show, Florida kids are the most fickle in the country. They tend to commit and then still take visits. It's just the way it is. I won't even blame you for that. But at the same time, it's still true. So corners, especially ones like him that have length, and he's from a really, really good high school academically. He's going to fit all the boxes that you want off the field for an elite school like Florida. I'm going to guess that he's still going to get interest from, tomorrow Michigan State could offer or whatever. There's going to be other programs involved. Which ones it ends up being, I don't know. The only question I really have, does he take more official visits in the fall? I think he's going to commit to Florida. But is that 100% locked in? I don't know yet.
And with Teddy Foster, I know that he's, like you said, like he's an enigma because he's someone who, size-wise, he fits the profile. He's very athletic. His film looks great, but he's playing for Sarasota, so it's not great, we'll say. So at that point, he would be the only corner committed in this class for the Florida Gators right now. How do you feel about just cornerback recruiting at that point? And obviously there are still guys that Florida is pursuing that would be higher ranked than him or would be their blue chip corner for the class. But just how would you feel at that point for cornerback recruiting for the Gators?
I think it's a great start. I'll once again, you got to recruit the kids that you believe in. If UF likes him, their corner coach knows what he's doing. That's been talked about a billion times. If he wants him, I like him. Who are the guys that, like when Saban wants a safety, Saban played safety, he coached safety. I don't have to watch the film. Sometimes it's not that hard. And also it's an in-state kid. Florida knows that area very well, a ton of alums and stuff. They know what his personality and his background are like. It's good to go. So no worries for me at all.
Yeah, Corey Raymond corner, Nick Saban safety, Brian Hartline receiver. We get it. You're really freaking good. All right.
That's right.
There is another DB committing this weekend. I believe Saturday, Jalyn Crawford has his commitment date set for, where he's someone that we haven't really spent much time talking about on this show in general. So I'm curious, just what are your thoughts on him and his film? And also, do you think he'd be able to kind of play that star nickel role? Because Florida's historically used a safety down there, but they did move Jaden Hill, who's a starting outside corner, to star for this year. So maybe now that Corey Raymond's in charge, he's like, we're going to do the right thing and put like an actual cover man down there.
He can play whatever. He's from Parkview High School. He plays in Gwinnett County. He's a kid that's went against top competition for years, and he's a dog. Jalen's a really good football player. Most people are picking him to Auburn. That's the word. Florida made a push on him. Whether or not that continues after he commits is your guess is as good as mine, but I'm going to go yes, because that's just kind of how recruiting works in 2023, to steal a phrase from you. I also think that Florida's DB room is in a situation where they need more guys with this kind of personality. You can't have enough competitive guys, especially from like Gwinnett and Atlanta, that area. Florida's done, let's be honest, Florida's recruited Georgia really, really well. I know that really makes your fan base unhappy when they beat Georgia for kids, by the way, just throwing that out there. But at the same time, they need more of that can play multiple spots. He could play outside. He could play the nickel. If you really wanted to, he could probably play safety in some capacity. I don't know if he's going to take the physicality that well, but good football players can adjust. And Corey knows how to move guys around anyway, and they need more depth at the nickel spot. That might be where a guy like him would start out. And as you get more strength, do different things, you could play him in the slot against anybody, but especially against teams that run the traditional receiver, big tight ends, those teams, you might leave him on the outside a little bit.
And we know that publicly people think it's Auburn is going to be the pick for Jalyn Crawford. However, publicly people thought that Fletcher Westphal would be a Clemson Tiger, and Fletcher was like, it was Florida or Arkansas. Same total. And Fletcher was like, no, it was Florida or Arkansas. And publicly,
no idea.
Yeah, publicly people thought Cormani McLean was going to be a Gator, and we know how that went. That one. that one, Miami fans had fun with me for that one. And yeah, so we know how those went. So how should Florida fans feel about their chances with Jalyn Crawford? Just even if he does pick Auburn, is Florida number 2, 3, or are they way down?
I think they're number 2. And depending on how this season goes and how much Raymond wants to get involved with him long term, it also depends. Like if something crazy happened and they didn't win the recruiting battle on Friday, that's a whole nother discussion. Then it changes things. Plus, does somebody transfer? So how many guys do you want? There are a billion questions, but I can't see why you would not recruit him anyway. You could never have enough corners, man. It's in the spread era. Even of all teams, Georgia even started to throw the ball. I mean, I thought that the world was going to explode last year. Georgia was throwing the football. You need nickel corners. You need big corners. You need guys that can just flat run. You need at least 2, if not 3 in every class. So I would still recruit him regardless.
Yeah, I think with Jalyn Crawford, it's also interesting that he's kind of picking between 2 schools. Again, publicly, we're like, okay, Auburn, Florida. He's picking between 2 schools that run very similar systems, very similar defenses, at least on the back end. Austin Armstrong's more aggressive, but Austin Armstrong likes to operate with creepers, and he kind of learned under Patrick Toney, and Patrick Toney learned under Ron Roberts, who's now the defensive coordinator at Auburn. So it's kind of cool, but he's looking to play in kind of that style of defense, it seems.
That is a really unique. It just shows how coaches move around, and it's a small world sometimes. And Auburn and Florida have a really good rivalry history too, by the way. So that's kind of fun. I mean, if you really think about it, Auburn at one point used to get like 1/3 of their recruiting class from the state of Florida. They haven't been as impactful in this state for a while. And by the way, their program dipped when that happened. Note to Auburn, you need to do better in Florida. But at the same time, they found some holes in Georgia's recruiting or whatever. They started to build their classes back up. And I think they're going to see Florida in the state of Georgia quite a bit. That Georgia can't get everybody too. That's the other thing. That state is loaded. I think we're going to see Auburn and Florida compete for a lot of kids along the Panhandle in Georgia and even in Alabama.
Yeah, and I love that because, as you know, Locked On Auburn, Zach Blackerby, and we love Zach, but I also love winning battles against Zach. So
I know you text him immediately. I know you well enough to know that.
Oh yeah. He texted me when Fletcher committed. He was like, "I love your class," and I was like, "Me too. Sucks, doesn't it?"
Oh wow.
That's how we're doing it with Auburn. But thank you so much, Brian. This was Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. Catch him all throughout the Locked On College channel and every week. And don't worry, we'll get him back multiple times a week on Locked On Gators. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back tomorrow with, Brandon Carroll from All Gators is back. Our Friday show, a perfect way to end the week after having Brian Smith Thursday. Actually, sorry, a commitment Wednesday, Brian Smith Thursday, and Brandon Carroll Friday. Can you get a better end of the week than that? I don't think you can. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC, hosted by Chris Gordy of Sports 790. Also, be sure to check out Gordy next week as he will be at SEC Media Days. So he will probably have some Florida Gators content for you. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole 9 Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33, and I will see you all tomorrow.